What is up, everybody? This is Adam. Welcome back to Fouled Out. Matt is going to be joining me in just a minute to talk about the NBA Finals, which is now tied 1-1 after Miami earned the split in Denver last night. A very, very Miami win last night. We'll talk about what that means here in just a minute, but excellent effort by the Heat. Maybe the finals is going to be a little bit better than a lot of people thought it was going to be, including me. So we're going to talk about what happened in the first couple of games in Denver, the adjustments that Miami made, and then what Denver needs to do to get back in control of this series. And then we're going to talk maybe a little bit Monty Williams at the end. You guys know Matt's a huge Detroit Pistons fan. He's really excited about the signing, even though it's basically the biggest contract that's ever been given to an NBA coach. So we'll check in with him, see how he feels on that and the future of the Pistons. Let's go. All right, Matt is here. We are fresh off of the Miami Heat winning last night to tie the NBA Finals 1-1. Matt, how are you, my friend?
I feel good that the Heat aren't down 0-2, making me look like an idiot. So,
Well, you had the Nuggets in six,
well,
right?
yeah, but like the only thing I guaranteed was that there wouldn't be a sweep. So that's locked in.
We're guaranteed that there's not a. What if the Heat would have swept the Nuggets, though? I feel like that would have
I,
just like all of us just would have looked stupid together.
yeah,
Except for like, there's probably one Miami fan out there with a podcast somewhere who was like banging the table. He's like,
I told you.
The Heat will sweep the Nuggets. Still time for a gentleman's sweep if someone wins the next three, but after the first two, that's doubtful.
Yeah.
Before we jump into the NBA Finals talk, I wanted to get your thoughts on something real quick.
Mhm.
I found out today that Trae Young is starting a podcast. This seems to be the wave of the future for podcasting is current NBA players teaming up with podcast hosts to host like their podcast. So I looked back at like who all has a podcast for current NBA players. It's like Kevin Durant, Draymond Green, now Trae Young, Paul George. And then the talent level, not like from a podcasting perspective, but the basketball talent level falls off so hard after that. And
Yeah.
we get into Pat Bev. Danny Green has a podcast. It's called In the Green Room.
Well, you skipped over CJ McCollum.
Mm. You're right. I would put CJ McCollum closer to
Yeah.
that first group of guys.
Yeah.
But I was like, my two thoughts. My first thought was like, should we do an NBA starting lineup with the podcast guys? Because it's like Trey, CJ, KD, Paul George, and Draymond Green. That's the starting lineup, right? That's not a bad team.
I mean, it is if you think that Kevin Durant and Draymond Green can be on the same team ever again.
From a chemistry perspective, it's maybe not great. Also, just the amount of shots that people are going to be jacking up. Like, do you think Kevin Durant would be happy playing with Trae Young?
No, not at all.
Do you, Here's a better question. Do you think that anybody is actually happy playing with Trae Young?
I'm not entirely convinced that Trae Young is happy playing with Trae Young.
I actually might listen to Trae Young's podcast just because I want to see him go out and have like a horrible shooting night and then blame all his teammates on his podcast for the loss. Incredible content. My other question for you though, when I saw that Danny Green has a podcast, I was thinking, who is the worst NBA player who could get a podcast and get listens? I guess we didn't get down to it, but Duncan Robinson has a podcast too.
Yeah.
But like, to be fair, Duncan Robinson's podcast was probably absolute fire last night after what he did in the fourth quarter.
Right. Seeing like snippets of his podcast, was interesting. Like it wasn't like, oh yeah, I want to listen to this all the time. But I don't know if I like didn't know who Duncan Robinson was, like I wouldn't have been like, oh, this is an NBA player's podcast. I guess that's what I found interesting more than anything else. But
I feel like we know, like we kind of know Duncan Robinson a little bit better than most people do
yeah,
because he went to Michigan and we're Michigan people. So like
right.
we kind of knew who he was before he got into the NBA.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of like keep tabs on him. I feel like most people probably just saw like the performance last night and they're like, holy
Yeah.
crap, who's this guy? He's awesome.
Whoa, that guy came out of nowhere. Like, I guess he's good. Like, he sure got a big deal. And then like they forgot about him for the next 3 years. And now they're like, whoa, who's this guy?
To be fair, the only Duncan Robinson conversations we've had over the last couple of years are why is Duncan Robinson so unplayable all of a sudden? And so like we're going to
And
talk
why is
about
Duncan Robinson making so much money?
yeah, well, actually like it's kind of crazy if you read the stipulations in his contract that he's making a lot less than people think he is because
That's
he had to play a certain percentage of games to earn
yeah.
all that money. So we're going to talk about the Duncan Robinson thing in a minute because it blew my mind last night. But do you think like if Ish Smith had a podcast that like he could get listeners?
To a degree. I mean, his name is Ish, which I think is in and of itself is gonna draw in some listeners. He's got some personality to him, so I could see it.
Because I'm wondering if maybe you and me call Ish and say, hey man, come host this podcast with us and we'll change the name to Talk Your Ish.
Down.
Just
All the way in.
automatic down. It's you and me and Ish Smith going over the NBA finals. I'd be down for that. I think that's what we have to do to rebrand this podcast is like
Yep.
we have to get an NBA player to come on here with us. And then like that's how we move
Yeah.
forward because that seems to be the new way of things.
Jose called around. You've done this to yourself by not coming on this podcast.
How pissed do you think Jose Calderon's going to be when Ish Smith is hosting with us and he didn't even get an invitation? He'd be like, guys, I was just waiting. I even liked the tweet that with your podcast in it. Like, he's like, I tried to promote you guys. What the hell? And now you pick Ish Smith over Jose Calderon. We're like, we're sorry, Jose. Your name just doesn't work for a funny title like Talk That Ish. I also feel like Talk That Ish or Talk Your Ish kind of like encapsulates what this podcast is all about too. Like it's very
For sure.
I feel like we fit that vibe. Let's talk some ish about the NBA finals. As I mentioned, it's 1-1. Game 2, I just think was such a typical Heat game. I mean, after game 1, almost everyone's down on them, right? Because they come out, they shoot horribly in game 1.
They don't know what they're even trying to do on defense.
They looked lost for most of that game. And then somehow at the end, they kind of they start creeping back in. It's like almost
3.5 quarters. They didn't look like they knew what the concept of basketball was. And then they're like, oh, let's do this.
Yeah, so there was like 2 theories coming out of game 1. And it was either 1, the Heat are just completely screwed. This is going to be a quick series. Like Denver is carving them up. We got their number.
Mm-hmm.
2, the Heat can't possibly shoot this bad again.
Yeah.
Like we talked about, Strus was 0 for 9. The Caleb Martin was horrible. Like a lot of guys on that team were really bad in game 1. And like Strus was the worst one, being 0 for 9 from 3.
Yeah.
But it was like, okay, they can't shoot that bad again, right? They've been lighting it up the entire playoffs. So I see game 2 as such a Heat game because they come out and they shoot 17 of 35 from 3, good for 49%. They make 18 free throws as opposed to the 2 that they made in game 1.
That they took in game 1.
Yeah, right. Well, that's the thing about game 1 is like good news, bad news. Good news, you made 100% of your free throws. Bad news, you only shot 2 of them. And then like you get the random role guy stepping up and having a huge moment in a playoff game. Like I said, Strus goes 0 for 9 from 3 in game 1. He comes out in game 2 and hits 4 of his first 5 in the first quarter.
Yep.
Duncan Robinson, who we were just talking about, completely like a ghost for the first 3 quarters,
Mm-hmm.
scores the Heat's first 10 in the fourth quarter and like flips the game on its head because they were down 8 going into that quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Love hasn't even played in like 2 weeks. All of a sudden, he's inserted into the starting lineup and he's like an absolutely crucial adjustment for them,
Yeah.
guarding Aaron Gordon instead of Gabe Vincent. That it's just so Heat. It's
Yeah.
a team win, it's effort, it's adjustments, hot shooting, ball movement. It's everything that have gotten the Miami Heat to this point.
Had this crucial ingredient that we've kind of just seen this entire postseason too is like it doesn't matter how poorly Jimmy has shot all game long. When it gets down to the nitty gritty late in the fourth quarter, he just flips a switch and like it's not like he necessarily closed the fourth quarter like crazy hot, but he had struggled pretty much all game long. And then he hits that contested corner three and then like hits his next two shots, gets an and one, like just total opposite of how he was offensively playing the rest of the game. He was also able to kind of let those other guys on the roster get the role going that they needed to have going to be effective at the end of the game as well. I would just say that like the one thing I would like to see change is like I want to see Jimmy be more aggressive earlier in the game. Like let's not wait for it to be late in the fourth quarter for us to say like, hey, I'm the most dominant player on the floor.
I mean, not to go on a whole nother Jimmy podcast because we've already done like 4 of them this
Yeah.
postseason, but Jimmy does all of the things that you wish every superstar would do.
Yeah.
Like he has the big games where he scores, 45 and pulls down 11 boards or whatever.
Yep.
But even when he's not playing well, he one affects the game in so many other ways.
Yeah.
Like even if his shot's not falling, he's still having an impact, which there are so many guys like the aforementioned Trae Young. If
Yeah.
his shot's not falling, he's zero impact and probably a negative impact guy.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many stars that are like that, especially some of the younger guys we see nowadays who, you know, even if they are guys who affect the game in multiple ways, typically, when they're not scoring, they start getting down and they start getting out
Yep.
of it and they're not playing defense, whatever. Jimmy, no matter what, dog on defense, affects the game, rebounds, assist, making the right
Yeah.
plays, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that, like you said, no matter how bad he's playing, that last 5, 6, 7 minutes when the game is close, he comes up with the big plays.
Yeah.
We saw it against Boston. We're seeing it against Denver. You've seen it in multiple playoff runs. He can have 40 points going into the end of the fourth quarter, or he can have 10 points going into the fourth quarter. And he's making the big plays for the Heat.
One of the guys that we've seen like really, really be effective in these two games so far is Bam Adebayo. It's been fantastic. Obviously, like there's only so much you can do about Jokic, and I'm not going to sit here and say that Nikola Jokic isn't still like a distinct advantage. But one of the things we're also seeing is that to this point, and maybe this is just their plan on how to defend Denver, to this point, they don't have an answer to stop Bam Adebayo, especially in that pick and roll game.
Well, I want to get your opinion on this because I was thinking about it today and I haven't seen this mentioned anywhere yet. So, like, maybe I'm completely off base or maybe I'm onto something. I don't like the drop coverage that they're playing against Bam. Every time he gets the ball, Jokic is like 5 or 6 feet off of him towards the rim.
Yeah.
And like, I know Bam's not going to torch you from 3, but he's a good like elbow jump shooter.
Yeah.
And they're just giving him so much time to either make a play or take a jump shot. Like he has all the time and space in the world, and they're just not getting up on him.
I would agree with you in that that is not how I would play Bam in that pick and roll scenario. I can also see how they look at the athletic profiles between the two and they're just saying, hey, keep him in front of you.
Yeah, but especially last night,
Yeah.
like with how hot the Heat were shooting,
Yep.
I don't like being that far off somebody.
No.
Like
And
I'm
that's the thing is like you're playing to his strength because he's able to like catch it, get in that pocket, and you either have to collapse or, you know, just let him shoot it. And he's not gonna miss a wide open 10-footer all that often. And if you collapse, he's gonna find the open guy. And if they're hot, you're just giving them 3 points.
yeah, I mean that's the thing is like you're giving him time to make a decision.
Yep.
Like a guy who's already a good playmaker from the center position,
Yeah.
you're giving him all the time and space in the world to say like, "Oh, I'm going to take a jump shot. I'm going to take this like pocket push shot
Yeah.
or I'm going to find the right guy." And I want to give credit to a guy named NBA Perspective on Reddit for these stats because I was reading this today. In game 2, the Heat had an offensive rating of 129 and they only took 11 shots at the rim. They shot 49% from 3 and 86% of their shots came from outside of the restricted area. Almost all their shots, 86% of their shots were mid-range jumpers or three-pointers last night. They're not attacking the rim right now. And maybe part of that is because Jokic is playing that drop coverage.
Yeah.
But when they're toasting you from 3 and from mid-range, like you're obviously what you're doing is not working. And they're getting all sorts of open shots off of the actions they're running with Bam. You need to change something up. They played the same coverage on Bam in game 1 and game 2. And I was like looking at it in game 1 and I was like, okay, like, Bam had like 26 points on 25 shots or something like that in game 1.
Yeah.
More efficient in game 2, but like the Heat got a lot of good shots in game 1. They just weren't falling. And I feel like Bam has a lot, got to give Bam a lot of credit for what he's doing right now. He's guarding Jokic on defense and he's playing 40 plus minutes and carrying a heavy load on offense too. And he's been really good through 2 games.
His job on defense right now isn't like, oh, you got to shut down Jokic. It's really just, you got to make him work. And I mean, they really made him work in game 2 because they took away the peripheral options. So Jokic did what he normally doesn't want to do and just scored himself. And like, that's fine. He can drop 40 plus, but if you're taking away everyone else, okay, 40 points isn't going to beat you.
Do you want to guess what Denver's record is this postseason when Jokic scores 40 or more?
Can I get the total number of games?
3.
3. I'm going to guess 0-3.
You are correct. They are 0-3 when Jokic scores 40 or more points this postseason, 13-1 when he scores under 40 points.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that he shouldn't have been scoring so much last night, but what I am saying is that it reminds me of Steve Nash and the Suns in the mid to late 2000s. When they would go up against the Spurs in the playoffs, the Spurs would say, okay, you know what, Nash, we're going to let you get yours. You can score 30, 40, 50. We don't really care. You're not getting everybody else involved. And Jokic had 4 assists last night. He could have had a lot more. And we'll talk about how dog shit the role players on Denver were last night here in a sec.
Yeah.
Because these guys were like bricking shots all over the place. So he could have had more. But I feel like the thing that Miami did really well last night by locking up all of the other players on Denver was that they made Jokic feel like he had to do it all himself. And you could
Yeah.
tell he was getting frustrated. You could tell he was like
Mhm.
pushing the action. And he did well, man. Some of the shots he was hitting last night are like, how
Stupid.
how the
Stupid.
F does a 7'1" guy who weighs 280 hit that shot?
Yeah.
Like in the
But
lane,
Joel Embiid's
in
the MVP.
traffic.
Just remember that.
Oh my God. So bad. But by like taking these other guys out of the game and making Jokic feel like he has to do it all himself,
Yeah,
you're completely disrupting what Denver wants to do on offense, which
exactly.
a lot of people didn't think was possible. And it's kind of funny that like it's like the way that someone finally disrupted Denver's offense was by making Jokic score 40.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound right. But when he has 40 and 4, like the team is much more effective if he has like 25 and 13.
Do it, bitch. You won't.
We dare you. I feel like that's the thing the Heat are so good at, that like it doesn't show up on a stat sheet and it doesn't like get talked about enough, but they're just so annoying. And they, you know what they remind me of? You know, like when you play your friend in Madden and it's like 4th and 4 or like 4th and 3 and your friend like goes for it
Every time.
every time. And it's just annoying. You're just like, oh God, like you just want him to punt it. You're like, just do the thing I expect you to do. Do the NFL, like just punt it to me. God damn it. Now I have to stop you again. And like whether they get the 4th down conversion or not, you're just annoyed at that point. And you're pushing because you're like, okay, like I'm gonna go score a touchdown right now. Like this guy's pissing me off. Miami does that.
Yeah.
And they do it to you by like hitting ridiculous shots with all sorts of weird people. They throw you off by doing things you don't expect on defense. Like they play man to man and then it's zone and
Mhm.
then it's like different matchups. And then
Yeah.
and even though it's like the NBA, the zone just like throws people off.
Yeah.
Even Denver, it's just a different look.
So many people, not us, because we've talked about it all postseason, but so many people have just slept on the value that Eric Spolestra has. Like he is a top two coach in the NBA. Honestly, I wouldn't be mad if you said he was number one.
I don't know who you would put above him right now. I
Yeah.
feel like you have someone else in mind.
Well, I mean, I still give a lot of respect to Pop. Like he's, I mean, even like after that whole squad was gone and there wasn't much left on that roster, he still took that roster to an 8 seed. Like so, I mean, he's clearly a very good coach, but they put off a real rebuild for a very long time, and uh, now obviously they're doing it, and to my own team's detriment.
Poor Matt. Yeah, my only thing with Pop, and I also respect Pop for what he's done in the past,
Yeah,
but I feel like there are certain coaches in professional sports, and I want all of my fellow Boston fans to close your ears for this or like just hit the skip button on your podcast real quick.
yeah,
It reminds me of Bill Belichick a little bit, where it's like he gets so much respect for what he's done in the past.
yeah,
But if you look at it from like an X's and O's perspective, just right now, it's like you're still a great coach. You still have
yeah.
all this experience. You still know what you're doing. But are you the best coach right now?
Right.
Mm, and both of them
Yeah,
are dealing with different issues of their teams. But like,
yeah,
if I'm saying X's and O's right now, I don't know that there are many coaches in all of sports that are better than Eric Spolstra.
yeah. I would agree. Yeah, with Pop right now, it's kind of like I'm holding you in that tier because I need to see what you do when you have actual talent on your roster. I mean, we all know well enough that like if you don't have real legitimate talent on your NBA roster, you're not winning games. And even when you have talent, like you're sometimes you need a few years to develop it. in the NFL, like, yeah, you need talent, but like you can manufacture a couple of extra wins. And while you can maybe do that in the NBA, a couple of extra wins in the NBA versus the NFL have wildly different values.
Yes. No, you're absolutely correct. And to Bill's credit, he has squeezed a decent number of wins out of a not so talented roster.
Man, he has at a moment in time made a rock look like a lime.
That was fucking poetic, man. Jeez. But I mean, and you know what's funny is like if Wembanyama is the dude that so many people think he is, we could just be sitting here next year just being like, God, how good is Popovich? The Spurs got the 6th seed in Wembanyama's first year, and they all
Yeah.
these guys are awesome. I actually like this is off on a tangent, but I think the Spurs are going to be good next year. Not just because they have Wembanyama
Mm-hmm.
or will have him, but with the way that the new CBA is set up, there are going to be a lot of teams that are very reluctant to spend money this offseason.
Yeah.
The Spurs are going to be one of the few teams that has like a ton of cap space. And there are going to be some guys that they could pick up who could improve that roster. Like they're not going to go out and get like a superstar to pair with
No.
Wemby, but I mean like someone like Gabe Vincent is going to be a free
Yeah.
agent. Like
Get him a supporting cast.
right, like with the new CBA, like not that many people are going to be throwing 12 to 15 million at Gabe Vincent.
Yeah.
So like you can pick up guys like that who are going to be good, solid starters. I mean, Gabe Vincent's been awesome. He was awesome last
Yeah.
night, right? So
He was awesome last postseason too. So like I'm all in favor of that guy getting his bag.
yeah, so I mean, there are going to be guys like the Spurs could rebuild that roster pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention they have their future picks and a couple of Atlantas as well if they want to swing a little deal. And I
Yeah.
I do think that team's going to be good next year, in large part because of Wemby and Popovich,
Yeah.
but they'll fill out that roster pretty nicely. The other thing too, I guess, is that like the same teams that don't want to spend money, there are going to be teams that need to shed money like crazy.
Yep.
So, like, say Golden State, and just random example, like Golden State's like, oh my God, we got to get rid of Jordan Poole. And I know everybody's down on Jordan Poole right now, but like the Spurs are like, oh yeah, here's the Hawks' future first. We'll take Jordan Poole off your hands. Like, you might be able to collect some talent that way as well.
Yeah. Is it possible that Jordan Poole ends up being like, yeah, we'll attach a pick for you to take him? I think if you're the Spurs, if you're not so out on his personality, like you do that in a heartbeat.
I think it's a distinct possibility with the set of circumstances that I was just talking about, where
Yeah.
teams are going to need to shed money.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very few teams are going to be willing to take money on. So, I mean, yeah, like maybe is there a trade out there where it's like, we'll give you Poole and a future pick, or we'll give you like Poole and Moody
Yeah.
to kind of take him, and maybe you just give us like a low, like,
A
I'm looking at
future second.
the Spurs roster right now. Maybe it's like we'll give you Poole and Moody for like Zach Collins, or like so just someone who will reduce your cap hit so that you don't hit that second apron,
Right.
something like that. And so maybe you pick up an asset or you pick up a pick, getting a guy like that. I think that's a very fair point,
Yeah.
So I mean, and the Lakers are going to be out there with money as well, but they're probably going to spend it all on Austin Reeves. They're
I mean, it's already pretty much been announced.
the fact that we can have an off season where Austin Reeves signs the biggest contract of any free agent is he's probably going to get between 80 and 100 million. And that might be the biggest contract that's given out this offseason.
Incredible.
Absolutely
Absolutely
stunning. But
incredible.
back to the NBA finals though. I was looking at my notes from the game last night. One of my notes just says, "Do I understand basketball?" with like 3 question marks. The Miami Heat make me feel like I might not understand basketball. I just don't understand. So they shoot 13 of 39 from 3 in game 1, 33%. And they I know they lost by like 9, but they had a shot at winning that game.
Mhm.
I don't understand how you shoot that badly and almost win, and then you come out the next game and shoot 49% and almost lose. Because for all of the
Yeah.
stuff that we talked about, Jamal Murray still had what could have been a game tying 3 at the end of that game.
Yeah. That really just came down to the Heat kind of struggling to close the game out. Kind of overthought things, didn't just keep running their offense, and had too many possessions where they didn't go get points. The Nuggets had a pretty long streak there where they just couldn't stop it. They kind of started getting a little bit too cute and really kind of blew that lead. Yeah, I mean they had that game firmly in hand.
Oh, yeah. I mean, both teams did at different
Yeah,
points. It was a very
right.
streaky game, you know?
Yeah. Neither team, I think, should feel good about how they closed out the game they won.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that like Miami plays that well. They only win by 3. Jamal Murray has that like isolation 3-pointer to try to tie the game, which like,
Mm-hmm.
how did you feel about that shot? I was beside myself last night.
I When I am in favor of it, it's being shot by either Steph Curry or Damian Lillard, and that is the list.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with that list. I think that the isolation 3 to try to tie or win the game is
Right.
an epidemic in basketball right now. I don't understand how you get to the point where you need a 3 to tie the game. You have one possession, the clock is ticking down, and Nikola Jokic doesn't touch the ball.
Yeah.
Doesn't even touch it. Murray gets the ball, dribbles it down, and is like, I'm taking my guy, I'm taking Butler or whoever was guarding him at that point, 1-on-1, and I'm shooting this 3. Like he made the decision to shoot that 3
Yep.
when there was like 7 seconds on the clock. He was dribbling it up and he's like, all right, it's Jamal Murray time.
Yeah.
They had 2 timeouts. And I was looking at Malone and I'm like, how do you not call a timeout and call a play where Nikola Jokic touches the ball?
Yeah.
He has to touch the ball in that situation. He has to. How do you? It's like having Steph Curry and not having Steph Curry touch the fucking ball when you're down by 3. He has to touch it.
Yeah, you just don't do that.
He has to touch the ball. And that's like, I'm getting beside myself again. But I like the end of the game, I just sat there with like a stupid look on my face, like different from the normal stupid look I have on my face.
Fair.
And I was like, I just watched Jamal Murray slow dribble the ball up the court and just wave off the consensus best player in the world right now. He's like, no, my time. And I was like, this shot's not going in. I knew that shot wasn't going in.
Yeah.
No pick and roll, no dribble handoff, nothing. And I know there was like, by the time that Murray got up there was like 3 seconds left on the clock. But even with 3 seconds, I want Nikola Jokic touching the ball, even if he's shooting the 3.
They could have called a timeout as soon as they got their hands on the ball. That.
He could have brought it up faster and called a timeout.
Yeah.
Did we have to walk the ball up?
Yeah. I appreciate the aggressive mentality that Jamal Murray showed there and that like he's not afraid, but that is just so tone deaf.
Jokic had 41 last night, and the rest of you bums combined had 67.
Yeah.
How does he not touch the ball? You brought up Steph Curry as one of the guys who that you'd be okay with him shooting the ISO 3 to tie or win the game. Just reminded me that I saw a post on Reddit over the weekend that was a retrospective of a post from 12 years ago that said, do you guys think that Steph Curry can ever catch Ray Allen in all-time 3-point shots? One, it's crazy that like that was a question. And it was a good question at the time. That was
Yeah.
like a good, legitimate question. And it was like Ray Allen averaged 2.4 threes per game over his career. Curry is currently averaging 2.1. Do you think that he can maybe shoot a couple more and catch him? To look back on that period of time when we were also blissfully unaware of what was going to happen to the NBA,
Yeah. No, we had no fucking clue.
mm-mm. The better part of the post in the comments, and this is like 100% dead serious comment from 12 years ago. This guy says, if anybody's going to catch Ray Allen, it's probably Jimmer Fredette.
And fucking incredible.
They go on to explain that like a point guard like Curry, they're like, oh yeah, point guards don't typically take that many threes. Monte Ellis just left. He's not going to turn into Monte Ellis 2.0. He's going to be more of a traditional point guard. Jimmer had just gotten drafted, or he was in like his second year at that point.
Yeah.
And they're like, Jimmer is a shooting guard who has the shooting talent and like makes deep. Because like remember in college, Jimmer was making deep threes from all over the place.
Oh yeah, Jimmer could shoot in college.
He was
In
just gymming.
college.
He shot very well in two places. Unfortunately, neither of them were Sacramento. It was college and China. Great in both of those places, not so good in Sacramento. We drafted him one pick in front of Klay Thompson. The only thing that guy
Not salty.
the only thing that guy got right in his post was that Steph Curry was not going to turn into Monta Ellis 2.0.
Yeah. He was 100% right there.
100% right about that. The fact that, I mean, like, mad respect to this guy for leaving that post up. Just brilliant thing. So I was looking back at my notes and it said, do I understand basketball? And I was like, what play in this game made me write that? And I was like, oh, that's right. It's when Cody Zeller got the ball at the elbow, drove into Jokic, and hit a contact layup through Jokic. I was like, I think that might be it. I think I might officially not understand basketball anymore.
Cody Zeller broke you.
Honestly, I was like, he started dribbling in, and I was like, this isn't going to end well. He jumps up, bumps Jokic in midair, and makes the free throw or makes the layup through contact.
Yeah.
That was it. But
other than Bam, like there's obviously like a really big drop off in talent in the front court for Miami compared to what Denver has. But people keep forgetting that like these are still NBA players. Cody Zeller is probably never going to get his bag because what is there to give him a bag for? But like he's still an NBA player who, when you create your game plan, if you can simplify it to like one or two things that you want him to accomplish over the course of a game, he can do that. And that's what like makes guys like Bam and Jokic special because they can do everything. Having everything thrown at them isn't a problem. But if you tell Cody Zeller like, hey, go be physical with that guy, make it rough for him, he can do that for a game.
can I tell you something that may shock and surprise you?
Go for it.
If you had to guess what Cody Zeller's career earnings are as an NBA player,
God, he got a bag, didn't he?
he kind of did.
Jesus Christ. Is that like over 50 million?
His career earnings to date are just under $90 million.
Jesus.
People forget this. He was drafted by Charlotte in 2013.
That's right.
So he had his rookie contract. Charlotte gave him the rookie extension that paid him 12 and a half, 13 and a half, 14 and a half, and 15 and a half.
Yeah, that'll do it.
So you add the rookie deal on there. He got $2 million from Portland last season and then 750,000 from the Heat this season.
Yeah.
He's just under $90 million. Incredible. No, it's funny though, because like, yeah, they don't have a lot of depth in their front court, but one of the key adjustments that they did make was inserting Kevin Love into the starting lineup for Caleb Martin, who,
Yeah,
man, Caleb Martin, what happened to that guy?
he's just biding his time.
I want to so badly take a victory lap here and be like, I told you all that Caleb Martin couldn't keep it up. But one, it was obvious. And two, as soon as I say it, he's going to drop 50.
Oh yeah,
But one of the big adjustments is that they insert Kevin Love for Caleb Martin. And now Kevin Love is guarding Aaron Gordon, and Gabe
yeah,
Vincent is not guarding Aaron Gordon. It's like, if you watched game one, you know that Aaron Gordon kept getting switched on to Gabe Vincent down low.
yeah.
And he comes out and scores like 14 points, which is like the most points I've ever seen Aaron Gordon score, like ever. I know he's scored more. I've never seen it. He comes out and he's just like constantly in the post against Gabe Vincent. Just having Kevin Love out there and having someone who's like the same size as him made a massive difference because Aaron
Yeah.
Gordon went back to not playing very well, which is like, I feel like the typical state of Aaron Gordon every time I've ever watched him play.
I mean, when you can do that, like, then you then have the chess pieces to kind of like get it under Michael Porter Jr.'s skin. And like once you really get those two dominoes falling down, it's like, oh, well, honestly, they're all going to start falling
Well,
because
this
that's their strength is the cohesive unit being hard to stop. But when they've got to rely on one or two guys, that's when it starts getting dicey for them.
this was the key to the Kevin Love thing. The real true key was not shutting down Aaron Gordon. They couldn't let Gabe Vincent guard Aaron Gordon anymore
Yeah.
after a certain point. So they put Jimmy Butler on him, which means that Jimmy Butler is not guarding Jamal Murray, which makes life a hell of a lot easier for Jamal Murray.
Yeah.
Game two, Love is doing a good enough job on Aaron Gordon. Jimmy gets to guard Jamal Murray. Now we're cooking with gas.
Yep.
And all that said, Denver still wins this game if Michael Porter Jr. and Contavious Caldwell Pope are not absolute dog shit. Porter with a team high minus 15 in 26 minutes last night, 2 for 8 for the field, 1 from 6 for 3, completely lost on defense.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen one individual starter look that bad on defense in an NBA Finals game. He was leaving Strus and Vincent and all sorts of these guys just wide open constantly. Teammates are screaming at him.
Yeah.
What are you doing? I mean, he only played 26 minutes for a reason. That's not a ton.
No.
For a guy like that. He was bad. KCP, second on the team with a nice minus 14 in 36 minutes. 1 of 4 from the field, 1 of 3 from 3. I thought he was a little too concerned with Jimmy Butler last night.
Yeah.
And he was like the first domino to fall as far as Jimmy Butler getting under Denver's skin last night. Because he was just complaining up a storm. KCP was.
That's those defensive concerns creeping back up for Denver. I know that the statistics for them in the playoffs have looked really good so far, but I also don't think that their road has been particularly difficult. And like to their credit, they handled that road as well as you could have ever asked anyone to have handled it. But here they are up against a team that is absolutely going to challenge that perceived weakness. And game two, it's looking like it's still an issue. What are they going to do in game three to make sure that that's not an issue? Because certainly they can change some things up, but how much of that is just the player having a deficit that the other team is able to exploit?
I don't disagree with you, but They only allowed 111 last night.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
not,
this is also a low scoring team.
yeah.
So
I
like
mean, like,
111 for Miami is like scoring 130.
yeah, but if you said Miami was only going to score 111 in Denver, I think you would still think Denver was going to win that game
You would,
with how good their
but
offense is. But
but Miami made serious adjustments and made scoring not an easy task for Denver. And that's what they do. They drag you down into the muck and make
right.
you play their game.
Well, that's the thing. Denver's only scored 104 and 108.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're lighting, like 111's been the highest amount in the series so far.
Yeah.
Right. So no, that's a good point though. That's exactly what Miami does is they just muck everything up and they make
Yeah.
you play at this stupid pace and they get your fans out of the
Yeah.
game because the fans are like, God, this is kind of
Yeah.
I think there is like a mental aspect to that as well that like no matter how Denver says they feel, that there's still some degree, whether it's unconscious or conscious, in the players' minds that they're like, this is an 8 seed. We are way more talented than them. We should be
Mm-hmm.
scoring 120, 130. We should be killing them.
Yeah.
And then you're struggling, and then you're pressing, and then you're getting more frustrated because you're pressing. And then Duncan Robinson is mean mugging you after hitting a three directly in your face. And you're like, why is Duncan Robinson mean mugging me right now?
And which team has legitimate NBA finals experience? Miami. I mean, there's a couple guys on Denver, but
But was the bubble legitimate finals experience? I think there's a lot of people. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I think Denver has options though for game 3 to make some adjustments.
yeah, for sure.
With how bad those guys were last night, it kind of gets lost that their bench was excellent. Uh, Bruce Brown plus 14.
Yeah.
Green was plus 12, and then Christian Braun was plus 8. So like those guys played really well. Actually, like it was the starters. Like Jokic was minus 11, minus 14 for KCP, 15 for Porter. Like, and I know that there's also like adjustments on the other side. Like maybe Jimmy Butler's not out there as much when Bruce Brown's out there, and maybe that's where some of the plus comes from.
Right.
But like I thought they had some really like when Denver looked their best last night and when Denver was building leads in that game, they were playing good defense, forcing turnovers and scoring off the turnovers. I think Bruce Brown brings a lot more of that to your team than Michael Porter Jr. does.
I agree.
Michael Porter Jr. brings a lot of other things that Bruce Brown doesn't, especially when he's hot.
Yeah.
But that's an adjustment that maybe we like to see. Like if Michael Porter Jr. comes
Yeah.
out and doesn't know where the hell Gabe Vincent is, maybe we see more Bruce Brown earlier in the game.
As someone who's had Bruce Brown on their team and like actually like watched him over the course of an actual NBA season, multiple NBA seasons, like Bruce Brown is a guy you want on the floor. I don't know how to describe it other than just like what you're getting there. Right? He's gonna bring the energy. He's gonna play good fundamental defense. And he's not going to overextend himself in a way that takes away from other players. And when Michael Porter Jr. is like hot playing the best of his game, like, yeah, you'd certainly rather have that guy on the floor. But what percentage of the time are you getting that out of Michael Porter Jr. versus what Bruce Brown is going to give you?
Bruce is a safer option.
Yeah.
And honestly, with how streaky some of Denver's other guys are, maybe there are some spots where you just want to play the safer guy who you know is going to be solid.
If we're talking about a series where you're going up against a team that wants to drag you down into the muck and play basketball in a swamp, right? It's not fun. It's ugly. Okay, well, which of these guys do you really want? I want Bruce Brown in that scenario.
This is the thing Denver needs to figure out before game 3 is like, we're going to Miami. We're going to war. Who are the guys that I want to go to war with for 48 minutes?
Yeah.
You know, Porter has to play. I'm not saying don't play him. I'm not even saying don't start him.
Yeah.
Just saying, like, if he's looking like he looked last night, then maybe you cut that cord a little earlier next time. Um, Also, just I want to talk about Monty Williams for like 5 minutes before we sign off here. But
Yeah, for
uh,
sure.
one other thing I needed to do real quick. We brought up Bruce Brown, who I called Bowen on the podcast
Yes.
last week. I also have to apologize to Haywood Highsmith. I called him High Moore last week. I don't know what was going on with me, man. All over the place. But I listened back to that podcast and I was saying Highmore, and I was like, that's not his name. And the funny thing about it is that before I said it last week, I was thinking Highsmith, and I was like,
Yeah.
Highsmith. That doesn't sound right. That's not his name. I think it's Highmore. I went with Highmore. Incorrect. I apologize. Or at least like I should
Is
apologize, but then he went 0 for 0 last night in 6 minutes of play. So maybe I don't need to.
well, we'll see whether or not he has another solid game. So
Get out there and earn your apology, Haywood Highsmith Moore. But before we sign off, I do want to talk about since the last time we talked, your team hired a new head coach.
that they did.
Is it the most money in NBA history for a coach? If not, it's up there for sure. I think it's the biggest guarantee ever.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's got to be close, but
But how are we feeling?
yeah,
Monty Williams coming to the Pistons.
it's. I think it's an improvement. I'm not gonna sit here and say that I think that Monty Williams is like the coach that's gonna take this roster to the promised land, but for where they are and where this roster needs to go, I think Monty Williams makes a lot of sense. And I think that so like one of the things that he has admitted that they struggled with down the end of the season with the Suns is that after trading for Kevin Durant, they got away from running that point 0.5 offense that he likes to run and just kind of got back into ISO ball with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, which is easy to do when you have Kevin Durant and Devin Booker. So I think his awareness of that means that he's probably going to be pretty consistent with running their actual offense in Detroit. And they're running that offense with Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey, I think has a lot of potential. I am optimistic as to how this team can develop with him leading the way and the young developing players that we have there.
I really like it as well. Um, you made a very, very, very good point to me to give you some credit when I was texting you about the money, because that was like the big story when he signed.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect the salary cap.
No.
So
So
why do
why
we care
care?
about what Tom Gores is spending?
Yeah.
He's a billionaire. The thing I really like about this signing is that he took over the Suns. Monty Williams took over the Suns head coaching job when they were still a pretty bad team.
Yeah.
They were still building, kind of developing. He goes 34 and 39 his first year, including that 8-0 bubble run.
Yep.
Comes back, they go 51 and 21 and make the NBA finals.
Yeah.
Then they are the number 1 seed the next year, 64 and 18, and have that embarrassing second round loss to Luka and the Mavericks. But if you go back, there's a certain key player on the Suns who may or may not have been allowed to play, even though he had active COVID. And that's not a conspiracy theory. And then uh, you know, okay year this year. Lots of injuries. Chris Paul's old. They got the weird DeAndre Ayton thing.
Yep.
Everybody there hates him and he hates being there, but he's there for another 5 years. So, and then they make the Kevin Durant trade, and you talked about that. But he took this like young developing team and they took a massive step under him.
Yeah.
The Pistons desperately need someone who is going to develop their young talent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not Dwayne Casey.
No.
That was your biggest problem when they hired Dwayne Casey, was like, this dude's never developed a player in his life.
Yeah, he got a lot of credit for DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry that I don't think he ever earned. I'm sure he got a lot of credit for Siakam and all that, but like these guys were kind of just good from the start.
If
And
you also, if you go back though and kind of read some of the stuff, there's a pretty strong indication that Nick Nurse might have been responsible for like guys like Fred Van Vliet and Pascal Siakam a little bit
yeah,
more. Like,
well, Nick Nurse was responsible for the offense for like crafting the offense that got Dwayne Casey the Coach of the Year award. So like that was definitely a thing.
well, you knew it was a thing because they fired Casey and they instantly promoted Nick Nurse. They're just like, oh no, we have our guy. It's Nick Nurse.
Yeah. Dwayne Casey's tenure wasn't like completely without value. I think he did help develop some level of culture and like a non-toxic locker room, which is something that can very easily develop if you're not winning. And the Pistons definitely haven't done that. A change was needed, but he did one of the things that he needed to do while he's there. And now we got a guy there that has done what we need the coach to do.
I'll give Casey credit that he did help kind of develop the base from which you're going to build.
Yeah.
He basically dug out the basement and poured the concrete. We got most of the foundation set now.
Yeah.
You got your guys you're going to move forward with. You got Cade, you got Ivy, you got Duran.
Yep.
Whoever you're going to pick with this fifth pick in this draft, like that's your base moving forward. Maybe Killian Hayes. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Monty is the guy who's going to like really finish that foundation and start building up. Is he going to take them and be like a playoff team next season? Probably not, unless Cade and Ivy take some huge jumps.
Yeah.
But you need to start building, and you need, like, you hit the buzzword, culture. You start building up the guys and developing them. You start setting the culture. And like, let me tell you, from someone who just watched their team go through a major transformation, that just like setting the culture makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
Like that was when I did my MBA, that was like the number one thing we talked about is like culture. And it's like, oh yeah. It's just a stupid buzzword. And then you see like the effects in real life and business. And then also like in team sports, it's a huge, huge thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And by all accounts, all reports, like all these young guys on this Pistons roster, like they like each other, they get along, which is really, really important because as you're doing that development, as you are doing the hard work that it takes to actually be good in the NBA, like you need that kind of foundation for players to be able to like call each other out when they need to call each other out.
Yep. Well, just wait till Marvin Bagley calls out everybody else in a diss track, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Well, we'll see where he goes from there.
Yeah. Hopefully not back to Sacramento. But
guaranteed.
That is it for us. As always, Fouled Out can be found on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Pocket Cast, Overcast, anywhere you get your podcast. And starting with this podcast, you can actually find our podcast on YouTube at Fouled Out Sports. We'll post that on Twitter, and we'll post that on the episode link as well when this episode comes out. But we're launching all of the audio versions of this podcast on YouTube because apparently that's a very popular platform for people to listen to podcasts on. I had no idea. I just watched YouTube videos, but I've been talking to people and reading about it, and apparently, like, people love listening to podcasts on YouTube. So we're gonna have some cool cover art for the podcast, and then for each episode that my wife Marley has helped us develop. So that'll be up, and we'll have the audio for the episode for you guys on YouTube. And then we have like the short clips on TikTok at Fouled Out Sports Podcast. It's a long name, but you can't miss it. You can find us pretty much everywhere. We're here. We drop episodes every week. You can listen to us on a lot of listening platforms as well as YouTube. You find videos on TikTok. You can hit us up on Twitter. We're all over the place. If you guys want to engage with us, we love you guys and we'd love to hear from you. What is the best podcast name we could change to if we had Jose Calderon as our guest host?
Ooh, I'm going to need to stew on that for a bit.
That's our homework assignment for next week.
Yeah.
Come with what NBA players we're going to get to host the podcast and what the new name of the podcast is going to be. Talk Your Ish is already taken.
Yeah.
That was the first one. So,
yeah. And I clearly need to get back on the Jose Calderon memeing.
I think like the best moment in the history of this podcast was when you tweeted out the episode and tagged Jose Calderon and he liked it.
Yeah.
Goated. Well, all right, everybody. This comes out on Tuesday, June 6th. Game 3 is the 7th. And then Matt and I will be back next week to catch up on where the NBA finals are and where it's going. And until then, hope you guys enjoy the basketball. There's an excellent hockey series on as well. Have fun, man. This is the last week or two before we enter the dark period.
Yeah. But we got you in that dark period.
Mm-hmm. No worries. We got all sorts of plans for you guys. But all right, my friend, I will see you soon.
Yep.
All right. Bye, guys.
All right.
Bye, Mom.